Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
People first. We have a very strong, we have a 5-point flywheel that we use across all of our solutions. It starts with people. Companies are just groups of people, right? So we actually prescriptively hire using the Who book by G.H. Smart, one of my favorite books, around the hiring A players and trying to take the gut out of recruitment.
That was Bob Bennett, the CEO of Engagesmart, and he is our special guest this week on episode 161 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and I'm your host, Greg Myers. Bob is an avid squash player with an underdog mentality and a passion for sales. He has run 4 different companies over the last 30 years, and today he's the CEO of Engagesmart, which is a bill presentment company that simplifies customer and client engagement through electronic payments. Their goal is to make invoicing 100% paperless. They also promote autopay solutions for invoice management through their proprietary brand called Invoice Cloud. Bob and I talk about his journey, including his highly prescriptive method for hiring, recruiting, and retaining employees, his desire to create a unique SaaS company that instills his personal and professional grow or die philosophy. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Bob. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in and we'll go into your career in a minute, but let's talk a little bit about you, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
So New England, Maine, Massachusetts, and did spend 11 years in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, but grew up in New England, in harsh winters and rooting for, really bad teams when I was growing up, the Patriots and the Red Sox, and, building that inferiority complex, the underdog mentality that became important, I think, later in life to always be worried about someone stepping on you from New York.
Okay. You guys had a recent snowstorm, didn't you?
Yeah, well, we're still waiting for the next one. It's April 21st, and we're not done yet, probably, but we haven't had anything for maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
Which is pretty good.
That's good. Well, maybe the Patriots will turn things around this year.
They'll be good. I think they'll be good, but Buffalo looks tough. And the Steelers, of course, Greg. Let's not forget your team.
Right, of course. All right, well, let's talk about the company Engagesmart. So tell the audience what Engagesmart does.
So Engagesmart simplifies customer and client engagement with electronic payments running throughout all of our solutions. So we are a suite of solutions for that simplification. So Invoice Cloud was what we started with. I founded that company 13 years ago with the electronic bill presentment and electronic payment sort of thesis in mind to sort of simplify, let people go paperless, let people sign up for autopay. I had come from the electronic payment business, running a company called Sage Payments, and prior to that, Veris Card Services. Sage Payments has now become Paya, actually after a couple of different ownership changes, which I think is a publicly traded company. But I ran that for a while, left them in 2008, came up with the sort of differentiation around presenting bills and allowing people to go paperless and driving more paperless, more cost savings and autopay. Billers want 100% paperless and 100% autopay if they can get there. Our solution for Invoice Cloud drives a consumer base to that state faster than anybody else. We got good at customer engagement. I wasn't thinking that way in the beginning, a typical entrepreneur. You start with one idea and it turns into something that's maybe a little bit better in this case, which was really getting good at driving customer adoption through multiple email notifications. Your first bill's ready to pay, second reminder, third reminder just before the due date, don't be late, that type of thing. Turned into a really strong customer engagement platform that we got good at and became a differentiator for us. So we decided to take some money from Summit Partners, a private equity firm in Boston, and go out and buy other solutions in interesting spaces. Invoice Cloud was already in utilities, tax billing, and we intended to move into insurance, consumer finance, telecom, and so forth, all of which we have segued into to a certain extent. And we decided to buy other solutions that are in interesting spaces like healthcare. So we bought HealthPay 24 for large healthcare systems like Northwell in New York City and Fairview in Minnesota. And we bought Simple Practice, which is a wellness practice management solution for mental health professionals, nutritionists, dietitians, speech language pathologists, and 10 different wellness verticals. We bought Donor Drive, which is a peer-to-peer SaaS solution for fundraising, both nonprofit fundraising, but corporate fundraising as well. So we bought those solutions and ended up creating this parent company called Engagesmart, because all of these solutions drive digital self-service. They're all simplifying customer and client engagement with a payments component that's underlying all of them to make it simple for people to make donations, make patient payments, make payments for their wellness visit, whether it's a acupuncturist, massage therapist, dietitian, or mental health professional. And Invoice Cloud, of course, with utilities and tax bills and insurance premiums, policies, and so forth.
Are all those separate brands still separate brands, or have they rolled from a branding perspective under that one umbrella?
Yeah, they're all strong brands in their spaces. So Simple Practice by Engagesmart, Invoice Cloud by Engagesmart, and so forth. So Engagesmart is the parent, but each actually has its own brand and strong alliance, ecosystem, partnership ecosystem around it within each one of its verticals.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned billers and bill presentment. So is that sort of the core platform, say, as opposed to a POS system? It's more around that engagement of consumers to pay bills. Is that sort of the core product?
Yeah, it is primarily around online billing and online payment for Invoice Cloud. And of course, as we got into it and our local government customers and utilities said, hey, we also need to take payments at the cashier's window and at point of service, we segued into providing, augmenting our online payment, sort of card not present technology with card present and POS equipment and support. So that is a minor part of our business. Probably think like 90-10, 90% online payment, but we do support the payments that come in through point of service and in cashier's windows as well.
Okay. And what is your go-to-market strategy? Do you go through a direct sales force, partnership channels, a little bit of both?
It is a little bit of both, but from day one, and I had created my company prior to this had created a very strong integration sort of go-to-market, alliance go-to-market strategy around independent software vendors, ISVs. And with Invoice Cloud, we essentially double down on that strategy. It's very successful. And instead of just adding, providing those ISVs customers with the ability to accept payments, we provided those ISVs customers with the ability to provide electronic bill presentment, online payment, and customer communication. So our system does more than the electronic payments. It's really the customer communications engine is really the key to the Invoice Cloud technology. Then we decided to take that kind of leverage and success around customer engagement, which frankly drove more payments. We gave the software away essentially in exchange for the electronic payment revenue. So more payments means more revenue. And so we needed to get good at driving more payments at each one of our customer sites. Therefore, the customer engagement, layer, if you will, of customer communication that drives, very high adoption. We took that kind of philosophy to these other solutions that didn't have as much expertise and as deep an expertise in that electronic bill presentment and payment, but they had great expertise in serving customers in wellness and serving customers in enterprise healthcare and nonprofits and so forth. So we decided to merge their knowledge with our knowledge and create best practices around these SaaS solutions for all verticals that we could now try to get everybody to grow at a very high rate.
Okay, so are you today charging SaaS fees and transaction fees, or still mainly transaction fees?
Both, actually. So I think, probably over the last year, we're probably around 40% subscription and 60% transactional. So yes, both SaaS fees and payment transaction fees. And paperless. We make some money when people go paperless. We kind of share the savings, if you will, with billers when consumers go paperless. So, we're saving mail, we're saving toner and paper. We share the savings and have a little bit of a revenue stream there as well.
And I always like to ask this because I think, I talk to a lot of leaders in different verticals and different spaces, and it's always interesting and, how COVID has affected their business. So curious for the last couple of years. I mean, obviously 2020 was maybe the worst, but just curious how COVID affected your business.
Yeah, the net, our two largest solutions are Simple Practice and Invoice Cloud. So Simple Practice is a wellness platform that was originally in 2017 when we acquired the company. It was virtually all mental health. We've segued it into nutrition, dietitians, and speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and 10 total wellness verticals. But we actually had embedded telehealth into Simple Practice in 2018. So when 2020 rolled around, we already had a seamless telehealth, so think video conferencing for mental health professionals. We already had that embedded in the company. So we actually saw a big spike in free trials that converted into paying customers back in March and April of 2020. Similarly, the second largest vertical for us is utilities, tax billers and insurance for Invoice Cloud. And Invoice Cloud is contactless payments, and all those cashiers' windows closed down. So we actually had a spike in contactless payment from the pandemic there as well. Donor Drive and HealthPay24, where they are more centered on HealthPay24 is enterprise healthcare. That was a tough market. You couldn't get the attention of anybody to sell more solutions and systems to. But that growth slowed down there. And Donor Drive, of course, supports walks, runs, and rides. And there were very few walks, runs, and rides in 2020. So they still were able to grow, believe it or not, because we had pivoted in the previous year into virtual events. And those nonprofits still need to raise money. And those virtual events don't raise as much as the in-person events, but they still can be very successful by doing these virtual events. So, then Donor Drive in the second year of the pandemic actually bounced back very nicely and posted very strong growth. So yeah, we actually had tailwinds overall from the pandemic, and we continue to enjoy, since we have very high retention in all of our solutions. They're true SaaS, so we're constantly enhancing. So everybody's constantly getting, sort of think about it as a car in the driveway, and every time you walk out to the driveway, every new day, whatever was enhanced is now in that car. So it retains that new car smell. Those customers that joined us in past couple of years still are with us, and our doctrine around driving higher adoption helps to raise their boats and drive more growth for us on the transactional part of our business.
Sure. What would you say differentiates your company from your competitors out there?
People first. I mean, we have a 5-point flywheel that we use across all of our solutions. It starts with people. I mean, companies are just groups of people, right? So we actually prescriptively hire using the Who book by G.H. Smart, one of my favorite books, around the hiring A players and trying to take the gut out of recruitment. I don't know if you've ever read that book, Greg, but it's a great one. Highly prescriptive method for hiring and recruiting and retaining A players. So it starts with people. And then when we hire people that are within the verticals that we serve, so that we can be truly customer focused. So we take people, like when we wanted to move into occupational therapy at Simple Practice, we hired a guy named Mike J, who is an occupational therapist. Or Invoice Cloud, to move into insurance, we hired Julie Shiania, decades-long experienced professional in insurance. That way we can put a very keen ear to the voice of the customer, be customer-driven with our product roadmap. That helps drive towards product leadership, which is easy to say you're a product leader, but not as easy to say you're a product leader as judged by adoption. So we actually have a truly high adopting solution across all of our wellness verticals that's the highest adopting in the space across the board. And that requires constant reinvestment. So they have to be true SaaS so that you can continually upgrade everybody without having to do patches and downloads and so forth. So anyway, that product leadership is critical to our ability to maintain that customer high net promoter score, customer satisfaction, and so forth. That helps us take an efficient go-to-market, which is through alliances. I know long-winded answer to your question, but the alliances drive our top of funnel across, Invoice Cloud for, we've got partners that provide insurance core billing systems, utility core billing systems, local government core billing systems. And we partner with them to lift the experience up for them. We share a little revenue back with them that lets us lean on each other and obviously provides a moat around our go-to-market. And then that alliance strategy and that efficient go-to-market, it's all digital marketing for Simple Practice, actually. We don't have any salespeople there. It's 100% free trials that convert in 30 days at a very high rate into paying customers that drives that flywheel. But in both cases, in enterprise, which is the Invoice Cloud, HealthPay 24, and Donor Drive segment, and Simple Practice is what we call the SMB segment, we have very efficient go-to-market that drives positive EBITDA and positive top-line growth that gives us the funds to start at the top of the flywheel and hire more A players.
Okay. Where do you see, and you can answer this question kind of either in the consumer engagement vein or payments, either one or both, but where do you see the industry headed, say, in the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, choices. People want to pay the way they want to pay. I mean, we're seeing a lot of crypto. We now accept cryptocurrency through our relationship with PayPal as an example. We are in a unique position with our solutions in that the customer is presented with the options to pay that we select, right? I mean, if we want to allow Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, we do. Obviously, the more payment types you allow and encourage, electronic checks, for example, the more payments we're going to get. So crypto is now something that's been added, pay by text. So we call it omni payments, but you've got to be able to provide the customer with the ability to pay and simplify it. One of the major trends that we've seen with our customer base and its technology that we provide is when they're onboarding a new customer, whether it's a utility or a new patient for a psychologist or for a nutrition or a nutritionist or whatever, if they can capture the payment information upfront in the onboarding process and allow that patient or the consumer to sign up for autopay and have the ability and give them obviously a clear direction that just because you're on autopay, if you see something that's not right in the bill, you can still stop it at any time. It gives our customer, the utility or the clinician, the ability to have more people on autopay and worry less and staff less around collections. The administrative burden goes way down. So the more you can engage with the consumer way up front, the higher the collections rate and the more satisfied the customer, ultimately the consumer, will ultimately become. I don't know if that answers your question appropriately, but that's my ramble.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I rarely have a conversation about the future of payments without crypto being mentioned. So it was interesting that you mentioned that. And then obviously, another big trend that you always hear about is removing friction from the experience. So, you kind of touched on that. I did want to go back and ask another question about the company. Are you just US based or global, or where do you conduct business today?
So we have a $28 billion total addressable market, United States only. We really don't even have Canada or Mexico, Latin America. We're domestic only right now, and we're a high growth company, so we really have lots of wood to chop in the United States right in front of us here. We don't really need to go international, but it's an option for us as we move forward, certainly. And we have some customers in Australia and English-speaking places that are using the solutions because they can. But our primary target and entire focus is on domestic.
Okay, great. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about you. So tell us about your journey there to your role as the CEO of Engagesmart. You talked about founding Invoice Cloud, but maybe back up and start in your early career and kind of walk us through that journey.
Sure. I grew up in suburban Massachusetts and Maine, and public school. Went to a public college, University of Maine. Provided a nice education in applied math and computer science back when it was way back in the 70s when we were carrying card decks to the computer center and praying that you didn't drop them in the freezing cold weather of the Orono, Maine. And I was an applied math major, but I find that I really didn't use any of it. My true love was in the summers, I was able to work at and ended up managing this campground and marina in Belgrade Lakes, Maine, believe it or not, and delivering mail by boat. And, just a great job if the weather was good. And, learned that business was really my gravitation. I really just enjoyed the public facing, dealing with customers who needed to rent a canoe or a boat or fixing motors and, again, delivering mail by boat and seeing 100 different places, putting the envelopes, having my sister put the envelopes in the in the mailboxes that were on the dock and being able to just be outside, but, meeting all of these people and taking passengers around the lake and telling them about the lake and where the rocks are. And, it was just kind of both, a little bit of a public facing job. But I got good at running the company. The owner of the company decided to go back to Scott Paper and work full time during the summers when our business was 100% seasonal, and leave the running of the marina and campground to my brother and I. And, we ran the company successfully, that little business successfully. And I knew then that I was needed to be in business at some point, running my own thing. I went into technology, an engineering firm, and then went into, Factory Mutual Engineering in Norwood, Mass, where we inspected buildings for insurance companies and made sure they weren't going to burn down or collapse with snow. And then you got into software, since I was a applied math computer science major at Western Electric. They got me into sales on the software project that I was working for, and sales became my calling. So I got pretty good at selling hard things to sell, like array processors and that sort of. And the company that I was with at that time, Star Technologies, was not really going anywhere. I had options that were underwater. I've always been sort of financially focused on trying to create growth and wealth. And so I decided that I needed to start my own company. I started a company called Microfridge, a refrigerator, freezer, microwave oven combination for college residence hall rooms. We can't call them dorms in that industry, 4-letter word, but college residence halls and hotels and, assisted living, military barracks, bachelor officers' quarters, and so forth. So Microfridge got pretty big. I started that company full time in the end of 1988. And, in 10 years, that had become a $25 million company, profitable, and another company, a publicly traded company, purchased it. I wanted to get back into technology. I was after almost a decade in the appliance business, and did that. Got into IT services, helped a fellow down with his company down in Virginia. And, that company had a liquidity event in a couple of years, which was their goal. And I moved into electronic payment at a company called Network One, which became Veris, which became Sage Payments when we sold to Sage Software, which became Paya ultimately. And I left between Sage Payments and Paya and started Invoice Cloud. So that's kind of the trajectory. But, I've been in 30 years, I've run 4 companies, and 2 of them have been as a hired gun, and 2 of them have been companies that I started from scratch.
So what led you to start Invoice Cloud?
So I loved the electronic payment business, just the recurring, sort of think of millennials that are replacing check writers, older folks like me, I guess, that have historically paid all their bills by check. They're getting replaced over time by folks that don't even know where the checkbook is, like me at this point, actually.
Right.
And, so that rising tide provides just such a nice, tailwind in electronic payments that's going to continue. I mean, 40% of payments are still from paper checks. So, there's a huge opportunity that remains for replacing those paper checks over time. So love the space that I got into there with Network One, and had really good people there that taught me the ropes of electronic payment that I owe a great debt of gratitude to. And wanted to continue in that business, but differentiated from the commoditized nature of electronic payments. Electronic payments are highly commoditized. our cost of electronic payments is shockingly low and we're not a PayFac. You just don't need to be today, in my opinion. And if you need instant mids, you can partner with somebody that can give you instant mids, if you will. But you don't need to build underwriting and risk management systems today if you partner appropriately and still can have a very attractive cost basis, in my opinion. So love the space, wanted to add differentiation. So adding customer communication layer and electronic billing so that you could go paperless were two things that very few companies were doing. And making it true SaaS was truly unique. So, true SaaS was the only way that we had been building the product that we had at this company called Sage Payments before I started Invoice Cloud. So that was a natural segue for me to just start this company and try to drive higher adoption and higher recurring revenue than you could without the customer communications layer and without the electronic bill presentment that drove paperless billing.
Got it. So what are some things you're passionate about? So maybe one personal passion and one business-related passion.
Well, growth is for both. Personal growth of people around it. I'm passionate about serving customers because I understand that is, if you serve customers, partners and employees, the shareholders will be well served. So, customers, partners, employees, and shareholders in that order. I do love to learn and grow and to help my team grow, but I am also an avid competitive person, I guess, around playing squash. Played this morning and yesterday morning as well to sort of keep the blood flowing, try to fake out my brain about my age. And, grow or die, is kind of the philosophy for me in terms of life, personal life as well as business life. But, I love to see people grow and be successful and kind of what drives me.
What would your advice be to someone coming right out of college and they look at the payment space, which, today so much money's been invested in it. And, you've got the word fintech now, kind of the hot, sexy space. And kids, I guess, today can actually take courses in fintech. Didn't exist when I went to school, but they can, look at payments or fintech as an actual career opportunity. So what would your advice be to someone coming right out of college? They look at payments and say, hey, I want to jump in that industry. What do I do? What would you tell them they should do to be successful?
Well, I think almost every entrepreneur needs to learn how to sell. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to learn to sell, or you've got to partner with somebody that has learned how to sell. So now that's two people, which is not as good as one person who knows how to sell and can be innovative and creative about product management, product development, and so forth. So I think selling is a really, really important skill. The people, I don't use any of the I don't know what I don't use, I guess, but I don't use my applied math. I don't use my computer science. I use my social skills that I developed at my fraternity at the University of Maine and in my high school and, in my social endeavors, following college. I mean, the social skills are really critical, much more critical, in my opinion, than an academic education. So be sure to get yourself out there, get face to face, get voice to voice, and develop those social skills, the selling skills. As you said, you can probably take fintech courses now. Guess what you can't take in almost any college? A sales course. That's a big gap that is missing in colleges. I mean, you think about a company, what percentage of their expenses are in sales? North of 20% typically, right? Could be 30%, but anywhere from, let's say, 15 to 30% are in sales, direct salespeople, lead generation, sales development representatives, inside sales, outside sales. North of 20% is typical for your expenses. How many sales courses are there in college? 0. What percentage of expenses are finance and accounting? 5%? How many courses are there at any college in finance and accounting? Lots. Right? Dozens. But it's only 5% of your expenses. But sales is 20-something% of your expenses, and there are no courses in sales. So, I mean, it's all about the stigma around, somebody says sales and people immediately think used cars and, vinyl siding and Danny DeVito or, whatever. They're not thinking about the impact But it all starts with the exchange of currency for a product or service. And if you don't have people that are really adept at selling, you're not going to get there. You're just not going to make it.
Yeah. I think in some ways, everybody sells, whether it's you selling your product for a company, or if you're in accounting, you may have to sell a new way of doing something to someone. You may have to sell a project or an initiative you want to engage on. I mean, I think having those kind of back to your social skills thing, having those social skills and being able to present and to sell concepts, ideas, whether that's a product, a solution, or your own initiatives that you want to do at a company. I think in some way, shape, and form, we're all salespeople.
100% agree. So think about the advantage somebody has of actually having some sales training as an accountant, as a finance professional, as a human resource professional, having the ability to be persuasive in a very transparent way, understanding that building rapport, building trust with a prospect is actually perhaps the most important ingredient for success in a sale.
Yeah, I think that's some of the best advice that I've heard on my podcast when I ask this question. I think that's incredibly important. Well, Bob, we've covered a lot of ground so far. We've talked about the company and what you guys do and where the space is headed, and then obviously about your personal journey. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I think you've been fabulous. I appreciate the time and look forward to listening into this and your other podcasts.
Awesome. So what would be the best way for people to learn more about Engagesmart?
Engagesmart, www.engagesmart.com.
Okay. And how about reaching you? Are you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yep. Bob Bennett, LinkedIn.
Great. Well, Bob, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you very much.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.